Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning in to one of our talks today. I'm so excited today to be talking all about the freeform series, Everything's Gonna Be Okay. We have Adam Faison, Maeve Press, and Kayla Cromer joining us this afternoon. And Adam, I actually wanted to start with a question for you, because one of the things that I really enjoy about your character is that he's this pseudo-parental character to the girls. And I thought that was such an interesting dynamic for you to have to figure out for your character, because he's not their parent. He's also not the partner of a parent in the same way. And so how throughout the series have you not just thought about what that dynamic would be at the beginning, but really continued to evolve what that relationship dynamic is in such a unique space?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a really great question. I think we started off definitely, especially Nicholas and Alex, like he was very sort of trepidatious about whether to even come over to the house in the first place because he's like, this is very strange and like there's a lot going on here, a lot of dynamics. And I think we talked a lot about that, Josh and I, just about like how it was cool how he didn't dip out. He was like, I think a lot of people might have thought this is like too much to handle and this is too much baggage and then kind of dipped out. But I feel like for me, Alex felt like he really kind of wanted a connection. Like he already had a connection. He's like, you know what, like I might as well follow through with this. Cause I think up until this point, I imagine at least for me, this is how I felt like being a gay man in LA. After a while, you kind of just get sick of this sort of like hookup scene and that sort of culture. And eventually you're kind of like, I kind of want to, maybe try something for the long term and see how it works out. And I think, Alex could have just kind of hooked up and been like, I don't want a lot of this, but I think maybe he really did feel a connection. And then he sort of steps up and he's like, okay, let me see how this works out. And it's funny because, slowly Josh kind of like is very good about having like nuanced like progressions. It's not like, this happens and this happens like very sequential. Sometimes it's a little messy, which is like real life. And so, we get a little messy. Matilda and I get drunk in that maybe like third episode. And so that was kind of a really fun time to bond. And then I think you kind of see like where Alex and Matilda start kind of like, having a good time. And then, we have some hiccups. Genevieve and Alex have some hiccups. But, I think it makes sense. That's kind of like, somebody randomly is coming in. She's like, who is this guy and why is he here all of a sudden? Like it's a very like realistic thing because, they have no idea who I am and they're like mourning the loss of their dad. So it all comes in sort of like waves and it's a little bit of a roller coaster. But I really enjoyed how Josh did it because it was very sort of realistic. It doesn't happen sort of so cleanly where everyone just accepts change. It's a very sort of rocky progression. So yeah, it was cool where we got to, and especially in this season when Alex sort of kind of sticks up for himself and he, sort of sticks up for what he wants a little bit more. It was really cool to kind of have that progression.
I love it. And then Maeve, I wanted to ask you about a lot of your comedic timing and sensibility in the show, because you've been in the comedy world and diving into it since you were 12. And so how has doing a lot of improv and a lot of stand-up really helped you in figuring out what the comedic voice of your character was going to be in this show, because it's such a unique comedy aspect to it?
Yeah. So I was definitely raised in the improv world. My parents met in an improv class, so it's definitely been like a very big part of my family since the very beginning. And I love comedy. I love, especially like what Adam was saying with Josh, is that he treads the line between comedy and tragedy so perfectly. And that's what like, genius comedians like George Carlin have, did, where when you're watching an episode or when you're listening to their comedy, you leave kind of laughing and thinking. And I think that because I started out in that world of like having to think on your feet and having to try to make something both funny and thought provoking, I think it kind of helped mold Genevieve into this very weird character that she's become. And it was fun to get to do some sort of storytelling stand up in the show. And like Adam was saying, Josh takes bits of who we are and puts them into our characters. So she's become kind of a weird, a slightly less socially awkward version of myself.
And Kayla, I wanted to ask you about your process when it comes to creating a lot of backstory for your character, because it sounds like when you first took on this role in the show that you created a lot of very extensive, detailed history for her. And is that something that you still find yourself doing in season 2, or do you find that it just comes very naturally to you at this point?
I think at this point, it definitely comes naturally to me because we've been doing this for so long with the pilot and then doing the first season. You kind of really become in tune with the character and your intuitions as an actor in regards to what this character is going through. And working with the writers with season 2 on everything that they have planned, it did become more second nature with how Matilda would react to different situations, like with depression, the depths of how it affected her emotionally during the pandemic, her empathy, relationships, and family life. It just becomes second nature to a certain point when you get so deep into character development and analysis.
Yeah. And then Kayla and Maeve, the two of you have such a great chemistry with each other, with your characters. And unlike a lot of the other characters, your two characters have a history as siblings together and have the most backstory together. So when you first started working together, how did you really figure out that relationship dynamic with each other?
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is that, like you said, with our characters, there's stuff that was happening before the pilot. So there was this history that we had to create after just meeting each other and filming this pilot. But I think it really helped that we hit it off immediately. And I genuinely immediately loved Kayla the moment I met her. And I have this sisterly instinct to just want to protect her and want to make sure she's okay. And it's kind of this mutual, wonderful feeling. So I think it helped kind of portraying that on screen, that it wasn't fake. It was genuine excitement when I got to do a scene with her, and I just love working with her.
Oh, Maeve. Oh, so well. I just wish I could hug you right now.
Soon we will.
Soon we will. Well, I remember first bonding with Maeve at the initial audition when I saw an investigation Discovery Channel phone case on her phone, and I was like, oh, we're already sisters, true crime sisters. We're doing this. We're doing this. Because when I connect with someone on a true crime level that has that same interest, the bond is already there. It's just, you just have to elaborate on it. I knew we would become sisters in that very moment. And plus, I already knew throughout the audition process that we were both going to get booked for Genevieve and Matilda. And then we'd started texting between callbacks, interacting at table reads, and all the different auditioning and on set. We really clicked. I really see Maeve as a little sister, just not by blood, but by heart. She's the little sister that I've always wanted, and I'm so lucky that I get to have her in my life and as well on my on-set family life. I love you, Maeve.
Love you. Can I just sorry? The only problem was that the investigation, the Discovery phone case I got for free at an event that my dad took me to, because he knew a friend of his was producing this documentary, and they had a whole pile of free stuff in a bowl, and I got everything I could find. And so then I put the phone case on my phone and sort of forgot it was there. And then I met Kayla, and she really likes true crime, and I knew a little bit. And so then I kind of went back to the hotel in a panic, and I was like, I need to learn every true crime fact I can fit into my head.
The truth comes out. It was all a lie.
But yeah, I guess this is the moment I tell you the truth. That was.
Well, you learned it from me as a sister, so that still goes out a lot.
I love it now. I've seen every season of SVU. So
yes. Well, yes, SVU is actually based on real crimes or just inspired by, so technically that still counts. And we're both SVU addicts, so that's fine.
I love it. We broke the relationship and we mended it all in the
powerful stuff right there.
And Adam, I actually wanted to ask you about, it sounds like when you do character work that you do a lot of work with imagery and music. And so I was really interested in what that looks like and how that really helps you to form a character, but also how it helps you in working on particular scenes as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good question. I like it's so funny. I think for like Alex specifically during times when like I had never been in this long of a relationship before. Like ironically now I have been, but at the time like I was like, you know, what do I sort of pull from here, you know, for this character? But I think what I was kind of alluding to before was like a huge basis for it, but like the just that sense of like, you know, having just sort of felt like you're hooking up, and it's sort of a hookup culture here, particularly in Los Angeles, and never feeling like, you know, I was fully like settled, or like, you know, that I felt like maybe I was like wanted or wanted the person, you know, and it felt like so mutual. So I think that felt like really sort of akin to my life, you know, for Alex to sort of feel like he wanted to take this on. And then I think like a lot of times I would just look, if especially if it was like sort of emotional scenes, a lot of times I just sort of like look back or listen to music on like photos of times that sometimes it won't even be a sad memory, it'll be like a happy memory, and sometimes that actually gets me sort of like in my head space of like sort of an emotional head space, because you know, it doesn't always like come right away, and sometimes you kind of have to like probe your mind with things. And then like songs, like there's like certain songs that I listen to that kind of like get me in the headspace, especially if I'm like, I think Josh, I can sometimes get mad at naturally, but sometimes I have to like work a little bit at it, because he'll try to charm you out of it. And he's like, the trick that I do is that I'm charming, but the other person in the scene has to get progressively more mad while I just stay charming. And I was like, well, that's freaking annoying. So that actually did maybe end up helping me inadvertently. But he'd be like, you know, so I'm going to stay the same, but you have to get more progressively angry, because like, that's the whole thing, is like, you know, Nicholas is always just sort of treating it as a joke. And then that sort of becomes the crux of the issues for Alex and Nicholas. So, you know, during those times, you know, you just like, sometimes you gotta like listen to something. At least that was kind of a lot what I was doing in school, was just like listening to music and sort of like looking at like different pictures and stuff that would kind of get me into like a more like vulnerable headspace. But I know some people are like, it's very like woo woo and whatever, so I feel so silly saying it sometimes. But I mean, yeah, sometimes you gotta just do what you gotta do.
No, it's a really valuable tool. And it sounds like as well that you often stay in those moments between a lot of the scenes, particularly when it is, you know, more of an emotional scene or some of the antagonistic ones. Is that something that you've always done that as an actor, or did you just find along the way that that was a really useful thing for you?
Yeah, well, you know, I think like as like Kayla was saying, it becomes a little bit more like second nature for you to kind of just naturally, once you keep repeating the same scene over and over again, you start to kind of get a little bit of that in you. So it's like a little bit like a muscle memory of sorts. Because after you kind of keep doing it, what was that like weird study, the Stanford prison experiment, where they started like, they told them that they were like prisoners, and then they believed it, you know? It's like after a while you keep just doing it, and then you're like, oh, like this doesn't seem so strange because I'm doing it all the time. And obviously it's not to that crazy extent, but you know, sometimes after a while you can't help but like the words start kind of becoming a little bit more natural, and then you find your flow a little bit more. And like during school, we were never really like, I studied this sort of like school of thought from this guy named Sanford Meisner, and he's a lot more about like the if, like as if you're acting as if you're that person, but you're not actually like thinking that you're this person experiencing these things, but like you're acting as if it, because you know, sometimes people go a little bit nuts and then they, you know, get all method and stuff. But I tend to be a little bit more like, you know, if all of the circumstances surrounding me, I'm taking them in, then like that's going to affect the way that my performance goes and stuff. So I never like was like trying to be method or anything, but after a while, just by nature, you start to kind of take in the things around you, and then they affect like that ceviche scene. I'm just thinking specifically of that, and like being in a hotel room for 12 hours in like the hot, because we can't really like move a lot, and it was a small room, and him throwing that ceviche on my head, there wasn't really much acting required there, because after a while you're just doing it over again and you're getting, this shrimp mixture thrown on top of your head, and automatically eventually you're gonna start getting a little annoyed. So that was like, a lot of times it was nice. Josh was very good about sort of like letting us explore that, and sometimes it would just affect the scenes in like a lot more naturalistic ways, which I really appreciate about the show. I'm always letting us find like natural quirks, within the scene, and like putting those in and letting them play.
And Kayla, you've also mentioned in the past that you like to work method as well, particularly shooting this show and stay in moments and scenes. How does that really help you in terms of staying in character and finding your performance for scenes?
For me, method acting, it's about becoming the character from the inside out. I really have to get a sense of where Matilda is in that exact moment in time. Sometimes I reflect on my own past experiences as Kayla and try to feel her challenges as she's trying to express herself in various ways, while at the same time trying to flesh out the writers and the director's idea of the scene itself.
And Maeve, do you find it easier to stay in character between moments, or do you find it easier to step in and out a little bit more for yourself?
Yeah, I think I kind of sit in that middle ground of, I don't really focus on who I am and who Genevieve is. I think it's just I do the scene and I kind of hope to God I'm doing it like her. I think there definitely was at the end of season 1, when Genevieve did the storytelling, I definitely felt when I got on that stage, those nerves you get when you perform for the first time again, which I haven't felt since I did stand up for the very first time years and years and years ago. So it was definitely weird to have those feelings again. Like I was going through the set like I would in real life, and my heart was racing, and I had to do, when I was younger, I used to have to jump up and down and then do the thing in improv where you go like 1, 2, 3, 1, like that, to just get my body feeling loose. So I had to do all of these things that I used to do when I was younger doing stand-up again, because I felt like I was performing for the first time. So I think sometimes scenes can kind of hit you a bit more personally, and you can kind of feel it throughout you can physically feel what's about to happen, which is fun. It's really fun. It was fun to get to experience that again.
And for all of you, what has been the difference in how you work on scenes together, how you're kind of like rehearsing or having conversations before you film something at this point when you all know each other so well, you know how you work together, as opposed to the beginning of the show when you were all just figuring it out and learning each other's styles and techniques a lot?
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, I think Josh really likes to sort of not over rehearse scenes, which I think does actually something really kind of cool about that. Like, I think Maeve touching on the fact that her getting up there and having those nerves, like those first few times, those first few takes, like that's really nerve wracking. And then you get more into a groove, and then maybe some of that falls away and it doesn't feel as like, like as first time, or as like jittery, like that first few takes that you're doing. And so I think that's kind of what he likes to not, that's why he likes to not rehearse as much, because I think there's some organic bits that come out when you do the scene the first couple of times. Obviously it still takes a little bit to get in the groove of the lines and things like that, but we rehearse the lines. And then Josh doesn't really like I know personally, he, what if I want to run lines with him before, he tends not to like to do it with each other, because he wants it to feel new and like we're seeing the scenes for the first time. And I find it's really helpful. It's something that I take now into other things too. Like I find that I try to rehearse the lines, but not try to think of what I think the other person is going to do, because like, your job as an actor is like to come in and it feel like the first time that this person is ever experiencing these words, because in real life, we don't know what the person is going to say and we can't guess what they're going to say. We have an idea, but then once we get in the actual like scenario, it could be a totally different experience, and we have to like let that hit us as a new experience. So I think actually like Josh, like liking that way has helped a lot, and I think makes the show even better because it feels a lot more organic and real.
Just a lot of trust, I think. And we know how each other, we know how we move now and how we speak. And so there's a bit more of an understanding of like, we sort of know what each other, how they're going to perform in this scene. And so then we can kind of create a bit more of a smoother family dynamic, which is nice because it was supposed to be super rocky in season 1. And there's this slight smoothness in season 2, I think just because of this pandemic we've all been living through and they sort of lived through as well. So it's nice to see that slight understanding that everyone now has.
And the pandemic also influenced filming. And I know that you weren't able to spend as much time together between scenes. So how did that affect a lot of the day-to-day of shooting in the season?
I heard Adam sing a lot. Sorry, Kayla. I just wanted to say Adam has a great voice. I feel like I want to say that every time we do any interview, I would hear Adam sing, and he has an amazing voice. And I can't wait to hear his EP. It's going to be so good.
Thank you, Maeve. I would just get bored sometimes. I'd just play guitar in my room, and it happened to be next to Maeve, and I would just be like, the Phoebe Bridgers album had just like her second album, Punisher, had just come out, so I was just like really into a Phoebe Bridgers phase. So it was very depressing, but I'm glad she found something optimistic about it.
I found joy in your depression. I'm sorry.
That can that be a tweet, right? Can you tweet that? That's a very Genevieve tweet.
Oh, it is.
Well, I think like interacting with season 2 was unique because what it comes out in my mind is those face masks that we had that looked like we had a dog cone on our heads because it was like a full face shield that went halfway, and it just felt like I was a dog wearing a cone and interacting with different people. We'd sneeze and then we would hit the face shield. I remember that with trying to interact with each other during scene rehearsals, but we still grown as actors since we did in season 1 and become such good friends and family. So I can always anticipate how they'll take their character direction in a scene. We really know each other personally as well as our characters in and out. And then I can't forget Adam's dogs. They filled joy being stuck in those rooms all day some days and just getting to see their little faces.
Let me see if I can get Laura. It's neurotic.
Oh,
maybe I can get him to come in here. Dorothy's in the bedroom. Come here, Papa. Come here, Papa.
It's Auntie Kayla.
Oh, he's with my roommate Omar. Here, come here, Papa. Oh, he's got food. Omar's got food. It's neurotic. Come here. Come here.
Lorax!
Oh, well, whatever. He's
like,
come here, Papa. Wait, here, hold on. He's coming in.
Yay! Hi, baby. It's Auntie Kayla.
Hi. I saw you have your cat in there too.
Hi.
Yeah.
Omar's over there too.
This Q&A is
hi?
good.
Say hi. You want? No. He's shy. Omar's shy. Okay.
I also want to ask you all about the experience of being directed by Josh this season, because he directed his first episode in the show, and nobody knows your characters better than he does at this point. So what was the experience of him directing all of you?
That's a good question. Nothing really changed, to be honest. From season 1, when he wasn't directing, he's still a director in his own way, because he likes directing us, because he wrote the show and everything. So to me, it didn't really feel different than what he did in season 1. Still telling us how to do each scene as the writer, but he just did it as a director. So it just didn't feel different.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. Even though Josh was not a director the first season, he was the director, because
exactly.
The directors would give you something, but then if they weren't clued into something that happened later in the season or was going to happen maybe in the future, and he wanted it a certain way, he'd have to be like, yo, just so you know, this is actually the vibe that I'm going for this scene, and it's not what it seems like on paper. So it's funny, sometimes we'd be who do we
listen to, the director or the writer?
Yeah, that became like a source of confusion for us at times. But like Josh is obviously willing to like talk with the director and make sure that they like they're heard and stuff. But it was funny, we would sometimes be like confused.
Yeah, and the director would come to us and be like, wait, didn't I tell you to do the opposite? I was like, no, but Josh came up to me and told me to do not what you said. So I'm just like, I don't know who to listen to.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, Adam, within that, you've also talked to the past about how whenever you do scenes with Josh, that you kind of instinctively know now if he's going to come back with a note. Was that just the same with him directing as well? That even when he was just directing a scene, that you knew if he was going to immediately tell you something?
Yeah, you're so good at like researching. You're so good. You're great. Like I think I did say that once, that I really do. I do still stand by that. Like, I can always tell if he's out of it or if he's not there, or like, especially now that he was directing, that is still a thing that I think he thinks about. But now it was really cool. He did something during one of the scenes where it was a big long chunk, like where we're arguing, but then there's all these bits that happen beforehand. And so he wanted to do cross coverage on the big chunk of us like arguing. And I think it was in like the fifth episode or something. And I'm just like, and I'm getting water, and we have a fight about how he never asked me about my parents' divorce. And he was directing the episode, and he was like, okay, instead of us doing this scene over and over again and getting a bunch of coverage of angles that I'm not going to use, let's just skip, like, let's do the beginning part, skip the middle meat, and then do the end part where we do the wides first. And then he saved all of like the meat of like us having that argument for when we did the cross coverage, which I like really appreciated, because I think he was also fully there with us when we were doing it, because it was new for us. And like, I think I stress that a lot, but he's really big about like making sure that it's organic and it doesn't feel like tired. He's like, because I think after a while, if you do something, a bunch of times, I guess if you're Fincher, sometimes you end up finding something like crazy and brilliant after like 99 takes. But for him, he's like, the sweet spot's kind of in those like, first 5 or so takes. And then once he's got it, he's like, let's move on. I don't want to kill this. And I want to make sure that it feels like we're naturally doing what we would actually do for the first time. So I really appreciated him for that. And I feel like he was really connected because, he knew exactly how he wanted to do it. He could be focused for the meat of that scene that he saved for the end.
Great. And then I feel like I wanted to just end by asking each of you individually what you feel that you've learned as actors from your time spent working on the show. And Maeve, I'm going to come to you first.
Oh no. I guess probably to be a bit more trusting in your decision as an actor. I think there's a lot of pressure sometimes to think, is this going to be funny, or is this going to be sad enough? Is the audience going to like it? Is it going to be kind of good enough? And I think it's kind of just to trust your instinct, to know that the characters kind of, them better, I think, just because you've crafted them and you've created them. And I think it's just really trusting yourself and knowing that it's okay to be too big. You can always bring it back. It's much harder to bring it not forward. I don't know the other way of saying that. So I'm going to just say bring it forward and hope everyone knows what it means.
And for you, Kayla, what have you learned about acting and yourself as an actor from working on the show?
Definitely to take it all in, all the hard work that each department puts into the show, even the littlest things that don't seem like much to other people that aren't in the industry, like prop design and set design, like wardrobe. It's all about creating the writer's vision to life, but in their own separate departments. Each little department has their own way of bringing the writer's stories to life. It's just something that I've come to really appreciate on a higher level, because everything about our show is so amazing with each little department, and each one, they have so much to offer. Some of the littlest things that you notice on screen just can make the full screen just so beautiful. And something else that I've learned on set is to not quote Josh verbatim, because he doesn't like it, because he changes his mind so much, and that's been a repeat. I'm sure they can tell you that.
And for you, Adam?
Yeah, everything that Kayla and Maeve said. I think also that, you know, when you're going about sort of tackling like deeper identity sort of issues, or like, you know, it's issues that come up if, you know, if you're a queer person, or if you're an autistic person or a deaf person, it's not always about the explanation of your identity. It doesn't, it's like, it's just a backdrop of your identity in the conversation, but it's not going to dictate or like, you know, veer the conversation towards that every single time. I think we see a lot of shows where the whole conversation is, I think Silas, one of the directors, explained it as an explanatory narrative, where it assumes that the person, that we have to keep teaching people about who we are, and like why we are our identities, or why, you know, we are this way. And then the whole show, you just end up like sort of being sort of pedantic, and it's annoying. But with Josh, he's like, you know, these identities are just here and they're a part of us, but that's not all of us, and it's not the whole conversation of every scene that we're doing, which was exciting because, you know, like it feels like we're taking a step forward. And, you know, these amazing shows that we've had before that explain a lot for people who may have not be familiar with who we are, that's great. But now he's sort of like, I want to take it a step further and complicate it, and you know, make it becomes a little bit more realistic, because like as a queer person, I'm not constantly talking about to everybody like how I was queer, how I came out. Like it's maybe one part of my life, but like, you know, now we move on and we talk about relationships and like quarantine and how that changes our desires of what we want as a career, you know. And so I think it was really cool. I learned a lot from Josh, especially like over these past couple of seasons, about like how important it is to kind of try to change the narrative, and, you know, and have different conversations through our identities, and it doesn't have to all be dictated by those identities. Yeah. If that makes sense.
It does. And I really love watching this show because of the amazing work that you all do on it. So congratulations. And thank you so much for this great conversation.
Thank you.